All right. So today I'm not going to do the historical bit, although there is a historical tie to this, so maybe I'll do it on Thursday. But we're going to deal with getting a package through the package manager. So if you have not done that, today will be a day when you do that. And I'm going to introduce you to a package that deals with, which is actually a good extension of what we've done up to this point. And you'll be able to, I think, intuit how these objects are made under the hood based on what we've done with jit.gen so far. So it actually does some things we've already done, but puts it in a nice format so we can just have those objects available and they're consistent, and does some other nice things. And then there's a couple objects here that we can deal with. What's nice about this package is that there's only about 6 or 7 objects to look at, and they all do things that we're already familiar with. But having said that, it's very quick and useful to be able to make some of the patterns and movements that we've been exploring that harken back to John Whitney and his idea of consonance and dissonance and digital harmony as far as image goes. So we'll start at the very beginning, and I'm going to have you follow along with me this time and make sure you're at a place where you can... Hey, Alex, congratulations on your successful oral exam yesterday. Make sure that you're at a computer where you can do some max, because I'm going to actually ask you to do a little bit of this once we have it and see what you can come up with. I think I'll guide it in specific ways. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to get this package from Mac. So packages are third-party packages, sets of objects that someone else has written besides Cycling 74. But Cycling 74 makes them available through this convenient interface. So when you open Max, in the File menu, there's Show Package Manager, and that's what you click. And here you'll see Jeff Kaiser, who maybe we should have come speak to us. He has a nice package here. Jeff has a nice package. And what we want to do is we want to find the jit.mo stuff. So here where I search jit.mo, and there it is right here. So this is actually by Cycling 74, interesting, but is not included directly in the Max application for whatever reason. So I have this installed already. You will need to install it on your machine. And you do that by hitting the install button. It may ask you to relaunch Max at that point, which you will need to do.
Do you know if the 1.1.4 update of jit.mo is like required? You need to have 8.10 of Max?
It should tell you. It'll tell you in the.
Okay.
It'll say whether or not you can install it.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure. Oh, I see. It says this package ships with Max 8 and can therefore neither be fully disabled nor uninstalled. So that's news to me. So now jit.mo is there, but you may be able to update it if you go through this package manager. Generally, there's a launch for many of these, which will just kind of give you an overview of what objects there actually are here. So there's some examples that you can choose to look at, but I will not look at today. And then here's our objects. So jit.mo.func, and I know that there happen to be objects that ride on top of this object. So there's actually more objects here than are listed. But this function one and this join one are the super important ones. We will also look at grid and slice, and we may look at time. We will probably look at field as well. Okay, so what are these things? A set of tools for generating real-time motion graphics in jitter. Perfect. Explore the examples? No. And help files? Maybe. And start creating your own generative animations. Okay, that's what I'll do. So what's important to know about how these work, and slow me down if you need to, is that you will need a jit.world. I will call this the motion space. So let's go ahead and get that dialed up. And you need two of these jit.mo objects to really go. So jit.mo.func, let's say. And I'm going to go ahead and put in a function sign. And this won't do very much unless you have a second object. And that's really important. It'll save you some time to know this. So you have to have the jit.mo.join. And I'll make 3 inlets for this, and I'll make the dimensions 100. All right, so what happens here is that you can either call this join object by name, or more commonly, you just hook into it. And when you've done that, that does more than simply output jit.mo.func to jit.mo.join. It binds these two objects together. So it gives additional functionality to this jit.mo.func to hook it into the join. So whenever you use this set of objects, you have to have the join for this to work in a way that makes sense. So let's just look at what this does this way. So here we have a sign function. Looks like maybe it goes down and then up, something like that. Right, so if we were to think about this in terms of what a sine wave does, it goes from -1 to +1. So here's our +1 side, and anywhere there's black, there's the -1 side. So we can already imagine how we might have done this in gen, right? We just norm a matrix going in, and then we multiply by 2 pi, take the sine of that, and then we get this result. Built into this object is the ability to change the frequency. So how many cycles of the sine wave are there going to be? So now we have 2, or let's say 4. We also have the ability to set a speed so that the phase of this sine will change, as we've done in previous classes. So if I set the speed to 2, for instance, then the sine moves. So now we have a shifting sine wave. That's convenient. There are additional things like offset or scale, so forth. But this is where we'll kind of start. So what's being output here? You know, what are we looking at? So here we have what's 3-plane matrix 100 by 1. So the way these Mo objects works is they assume that you're going to have a bunch of columns and only one row, right? So every cell in the matrix has 3 planes to define position, let's say. And we work with these objects typically in a one-dimensional sort of structure. So just 100 cells all in one row. So that means that we can use either typically jit.gl.mesh So I'm going to change the draw mode here to line strip, and I'm going to change the line width, can't see what I'm typing, line width to 6. I kind of put some stuff in there. It's just really hard to work with. Okay. Right, so this 3-plane matrix can define a position matrix for a mesh, or it could work for a jit.gl.multiple. So to remind you, jit.gl.multiple, motion space, and this typically binds to an object like a jit.gl.gridshape. And we'll make cubes. Okay, so there's a gigantic cube in our world now. You know, it's over here. And before I said, well, you know, there's two ways to do this. You can name this object and then tell jit.multiple which object it's drawing multiples of. And then you could set, you know, this object to not draw automatically. But that will all happen for you if you bind this object directly like this. So now, again, it's not that jit.gl.multiple is outputting anything to jit.gl.gridshape. Rather, it is that they bind together in some way under the hood. And in this way, the grid shape is automatically not drawn, and the jit.gl.multiple knows to draw multiples of this. So let's just change for now the position of the position matrix for the multiple. There we go. So now it's going to be unhappy because I have to bind this again. It's actually interesting. I expected this to go away, and it did not, so I'm a little concerned. Just going to do this again. Okay, there's a giant cube. Okay, it's not going to go away. I guess it assumes that the position is 0 right now. All right, so the idea, right, is that we want to be able to either position multiple objects or just draw a mesh with many vertex points. It's really the same thing, and we've done this already where these are the two things we've kind of used a lot. Let's for now just use the mesh. And right now, if I were to hook this up, we would expect there to be nothing on the Y and nothing on the Z, and the X would be defined as a sign. So that's kind of weird. Probably better would be to try to make a shape that looks like, let's try to make a shape that maybe looks like this. So here, X just goes from one side to the other in a straight line, and Y is what's reflecting the sign values. Okay. So how do I make a straight line? I could go into jit.gen and do all the stuff I would need to do that, but this makes it easier. We can just say, I want a line. And we can say, where does it start and end? So I'll say at start -1.7 and at end is 1.7. So what does that mean? That means that this line, if we looked at it, would start at the left side of the screen, because that's about my aspect ratio is about 1.7 to 1. And then it would go all the way to the right side of the screen. That's what that line does. And that's what's going to be our X value. And then our Y value will be the sign. And for now, we'll just leave the Z value at nothing. And if all is right with the world, when we hook this up, we get our sine wave. It goes from left to right. Right now it's moving. So I think we did this last class, but I did it with a gen object because that is the most flexible way to do things. And you're not limited to what these objects can do. But these objects are very convenient. And so let's say that there's a couple ways to deal with the fact that this is too tall. Right, it goes from -1 to +1, and it looks to be going off the screen. So I want to reduce that down maybe. And there are a few different ways to do that. I'm going to choose to just do it right here. And to refresh our memory, I'm going to choose to do it with jit.gen. So you guys tell me, what am I trying to do if I want to make this sine wave smaller? What do I need to do?
Scale it.
Scale it. All right, that's right. And that means to multiply it, right? So I'm going to go into jit.gen. Why wouldn't I just use jit.multiply here and then say multiply it by a smaller value? What would happen? Obviously,
It would change the colors instead. No, it would be the points, but
yeah,
it would affect Z maybe.
And X, more importantly, right? So X would also get smaller. So I'd reduce this whole thing down. I'm like, no, I want X to stay the same. I just want to change the Y plane, right? And so to me, when I think of that, I mean, I guess you could do it like this, add op and all this stuff. But to me, sometimes it's easier to go into the jit.gen and say, I know what I want to do. I want to multiply this, but only the Y part by some number. All right, so here's our matrix coming in. I'm going to multiply it. Well, no, I'm going to swizz out the X and the Y and the Z. Swizz X, Y, Z. So this gives me my 3 different planes of information. Right, so all of the X points, all of the Y points, all of the Z points, because those are what are defined in my three planes, right? And I have 100 cells across here. All right, so X, I don't want to multiply that. So vec 0, 0, 0. We'll leave the X as is. The Y, I will multiply by some number so that it doesn't go so high and so low. And Z will just remain whatever it is, and then we'll put that out. All right, so now we have a smaller sine wave, which, like we saw before, we can make it move simply by adjusting the speed of this function, which is nice. What other functions are there? You know, there's line, there's sine, and if we look in this help file, it'll show us that there's actually these function types down here, right? And you can call them directly like this, jit.mo.sine. So instead of saying jit.mo.func at function sine, with a scale, by the way, so I could have just scaled it right there, you can call jit.mo.sine or jit.mo.line or saw or try or Perlin noise. Perlin noise. Well, that's kind of interesting. Okay, so now I'm going to change the z-axis to follow something. Let's start with something simple, like we'll just do the line. And we'll say start at 0 and go backwards into the screen that way. And now it's going back that way, right? So it starts at 0 and then it's going back that way. It's not terribly interesting. So I could say, well, let's see what happens if I make a sign there. And so now it's maybe a little more interesting, like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So it's going back and forth to Z, maybe. I could change the frequency and speed of this, for instance, and say, well, I'll make this a 4:3 ratio and see what that does for me. That's kind of a neat looking line. The phase of this sine wave is not changing though on the Z, so I could do that. And now we've got dual motion sine waves kind of moving around. And we get these sort of interesting looking curves, right? Because we're dealing with sine functions, so curves. But what if I dealt with this thing called Perlin noise? So Perlin noise is developed by Ken Perlin in the 80s. It is a mainstay of computer graphics. So it's a kind of noise that's not as noisy as noise. It's a little bit more natural, a little bit more smooth. So I'll put some Perlin noise in here. You know, there's the frequency of it. Maybe that's a bit much. Maybe that's a little not enough. There we go. That's kind of interesting. Okay, so there's that, and that's cool. And now I've got my moving Perlin noise. Kind of wavy gravy. And you know, I'm not really loving the left to right thing anymore. So I'm going to change this to not be a line, but maybe be another sign. And this one will have a frequency of 5 and a speed of 0.1. And I think that'll be good. And so now we get our sort of typical looking stuff like this, right? Looks okay. Not my favorite so far. Maybe this frequency is not quite right. What if I wanted more points, right? So we can just change the dimensions here in the join. So notice that these don't have any dimensional information, you know, these mo func things, because remember that they're getting a lot of information from this join. So here I just change the dimensions of this, and that'll give me more and more points along the way, which is pretty neat.
I wanted to ask, what is that 3 and 100 in the join?
That means 3 planes and dimensions of 100, which is no longer valid, right? So now we have dimensions of 624. I'm going to reduce that down. I'm going to make sure that's working. Let's see. If we go to something small, yeah, there we go. So we can smooth it out. Okay, so this is pretty much what you already know, right? You're like, oh yeah, we've basically done something very similar to this, just using gen objects, but this is more convenient. But now, some of the interesting parts of this little world exist in the fact that we can take what is a, let me put this back to being a line. All right, so now our x is just going to go straight across again. And I'm going to make it so I can scale this how I want. So param scale 0.5. So now I'll just be able to multiply this by some number from outside, right? So scale $1.
Could you go back and do that again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so what I did is I'm going inside this gen object here, and instead of hard coding it to always scale by half, I'm making an argument for my gen object. So now I'll be able to pass in this word called scale followed by a number. And instead of always being 0.5, this number will change. So this is so that I can reduce the height of the wavy gravy thing. So now if I want to reduce the height, I can do so. There we go, something like that. All right, so remember this is 100 by 1. We only have one row. But I can duplicate this information and normalize it across the y-axis in as many rows as I want. Oh, that's kind of cool. So you do that with jit.mo grid. And the way I like to do this is I like to say, how many rows do I want? I want to have 10 rows. So what's that going to do? It's going to take this shape and it's going to duplicate it from the bottom to the top, -1 to 1, in all these different rows. Right. So now I get this sort of, you know, flag. Let's get a handle on that. Just be able to turn it around and kind of see what this is really doing, right? So I'll zoom out a little bit, and there we go. We've got this sort of thing going on. And you know, if we were to play with the play with this stuff, we can make different shapes and sort of interesting patterns. Okay, so I've got this grid idea, right, of being able to duplicate this many times. And to the sort of opposite end of that spectrum, I've got jit.mo.slice, which will slice off a certain number of dimensions, right? So right now we're not slicing off anything, But I could say I don't want so many dimensions anymore. So I just reduce the shape of this, right? And I get these little sort of creatures that move anthropomorphically, a tapeworm. And if I'm clever, I can make this move in better ways. So for instance, right now it's stuck on the y-axis. Maybe I would want to change that y-axis to something else and see what happens. Well, that's not what I wanted, but there you go. So now I can reduce how much of that there is, and that works in conjunction with this dimensionality here, right? So as I increase this or decrease this dimensionality, things will get spread out more and more, the vertices. Okay, so one last thing here, and I'm going to get rid of the slice for now, and we'll go back to the grid idea. All right, so there's a few more things, but one that's really interesting is that, let's see, I'm going to make this have a few more rows here. So I'm really going to boost up the density of this. And I'm going to try to make like a sort of Woody Vasulka, Woody and Steiner Vasulka thing. Let's see. All right, so here is a whole bunch of stuff, right? And these are all points, really, along the way. And because there's a bunch of points along the way, I can influence those points in some way. So I'm going to use jit.mo.field. And what the field is like a sphere that can either impose a force on anything near it outward or inward. Right? You can change the radius of this sphere and a few other things. So I'm going to say the force of this is going to push outward. So I will say it's going to push outward by 1. I don't know if that's a good decision yet. And it's got a location. I'm just going to put it right in the middle. So there'll be like a force field in the middle here, pushing out in all 3 dimensions. So we can expect to see kind of a sphere that things cannot go inside of. It'll have to go around the sphere. And all you have to do is just stick it right in the middle of what you have going on here, and then you have this sort of field, right? Looks like the force is a little strong. We're getting some magnetic pull around it. Or maybe the radius is too big. So let's change the force. Right, so don't push out quite as much or push out that much. It's kind of interesting. And then we could change the radius. So how big is this sphere? Sorry to be a little messy here. I'm running out of real estate. And doing that, we would have... oh, you gotta hook this up too. That's gonna be gigantic. So there's the radius of 1, and we could reduce this. And there are additional things like the fall off rate. I think it's just fall off, to change how this shape looks. Oh. Like how much does it fall off? Falls off very quickly, or it doesn't fall off, at all. Not really loving the line width here.
So is that like a skew factor?
It is I think it's how much the force falls off toward the edges of the sphere.
Oh.
So, if I go way high, there's almost nothing going off there.
Oh my gosh, that's really useful. I was trying to do that before. I didn't. Oh my gosh, it's really useful.
Yeah, and this would pull things in. And, if the lines weren't so thick, we'd be able to see a little bit better about the sort of magnetic flux that you can kind of have here, because this, in essence, is just applying a force like magnetic force. It's so messy, I can't even tell what's going on. All right, line width.
Could you use this in conjunction with the phys world? Like if you had a collision detecting object and you could assign gravity this way instead of the one in phys world?
Yeah, I mean, there is one more thing that I haven't shown, which is the field, what do they call it? Field. I can't remember the name of it, but if you look in that, there's an object that will tell you as a grayscale matrix. So in other words, a one-plane matrix, how far away any vertex is from, whether the vertex is in the field or not, if it's greater than 0. If it's in that, it'll turn a color closer to white rather than black, right? So there's this other object you use in conjunction with the field that will tell you whether or not something is in the field or not. It'll just give you a matrix of those distances.
That's cool. That's really cool. And so all of these are on the CPU, correct? Because they're not GL objects.
I think that's true. That being said, I mean, this join object is somehow getting its information about timing from the world. But I do believe that I can't think of a different way that this would work besides on the GPU, because here we're going, you see that these are, sorry, on the CPU, because these are green, that means they are not textures. So these are matrix operations. Okay, so the last thing I was going to do is just change the line width, because that just didn't please me about the way this looks. So change that. And yeah, I like that a little better. And then we can change this fall off, and then change this force so that it's really crazy. It's really pushing things out now. Change this dimensionality to something, whoop, something crazy. Whoa. And make the rows really intense. Still a bit much. Okay, so that's your brief, very fast introduction to the Mo objects. So now my challenge to you is, in the remainder of time we have, which is about 40 minutes, but really you have about 30, is to make something that is either an interesting pattern that displays consonance and dissonance. So in other words, you'll be able to use these functions, specifically the sine, the saw, and the purlin noise, to maybe generate some sort of interesting shape that maybe falls in and out of consonants. So sometimes things will line up and look like a very stable shape, and other times they will drift away from that. So that would be, if you're interested in that, that would be option number 1. Option number 2 would be to make something anthropomorphic, so something that looks like a little creature, right, that maybe moves around the screen in an interesting way that's kind of curvy and natural looking. That would be option number 2. Option number 3 is to ignore all of that and do whatever you want. So with that, I'm going to be right here if you have any questions about anything. Otherwise, go for it for half an hour, and let's see what you come up with.
I do have a quick question.
Yes.
How do you do the, I'm sorry, that was so much. How did you do the snake? Again, it was the split object, right?
It's called slice, so jit.mo.slice. Yeah, and that'll reduce the number of dimensions of the matrix.
I can do it now.
Dr. Tom.
You can, sorry.
Go ahead, Andres.
Thank you. I was going to ask you if you could just share with us that file that you just created so that we have a reference.
Sure. There's actually one on the Folio site too, if you want to grab that one. But maybe this one's a little more pared down. I forget even what I did on the one's definitely organized on Folio, but it actually moves the force up and down and does some color stuff. But I can send you this one too.
All right. Either one will be fine. I think.
Okay, so class mo will be this one. And I'll just throw it up on the drive, I think. All right, so in the chat is the one we just did. And then there's a little bit more organized one coming your way here. Also in the chat.
Dr. Thompson, I'm just confused on how you got that plane, like a sine wave plane almost.
Yeah. Okay, so
I got
let's
it to stack on top of each other, but it's like condensed, if that makes any sense.
condense.
And they're condensed, sorry, words are hard. Like in the middle of the screen, and then it's like spaced out across the Y. Instead of it being like on top of each other like a, I have no idea what I was trying to follow along, but.
All right. I would, so start with a world.
Yep.
Gonna need a join.
Yep.
Join 3 things maybe. 100 by 1.
Yep.
We'll use a sine. Frequency of 2. Speed of 0.1. And that will, and let's scale it. Well, let's offset it. So offset it by, let's see, scale it by half, and then offset by another half, maybe. Not sure what that's going to give us. My brain doesn't work. All right, and then we want to just make a line, right, that goes from the left to the right of the screen.
Yep.
Negative 1.7, 1.7.
Oh, it's actually jit.mo.line.
That's right.
Okay, I think that's probably what it was. I was doing jit.mo.func at function line.
And just to follow through, here's the space. This is our position matrix, and then we have to say what draw mode is appropriate here. Draw mode, line strip, and there it is.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just really confused because I was getting like, they look like little caterpillars.
And to follow even further through with that, in order to make this, you know, go up and down, sorry, to make a grid of these, I have to use the jit.mo.grid at rows, however many you want, 12.
Right.
And that would give you the
Gotcha.
stuff there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
I think that answers.
Does the world always need a toggle?
Yes. Well, there may be an option to just automatically run it. I'm not real sure.
Because I found that just by creating the object, it shows up the little window.
Yeah, but the window isn't rendering, right? It makes a window, but if you actually toggled it, it would change the window's color because it's not drawing to the window until you toggle.
That's right.
Dr. Thompson,
Yes.
can I share my screen? Because I'm still
Yeah.
getting the same thing.
Let me,
I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
Let's see, advanced, everybody, all y'all's.
All right. That is what I'm getting.
Yep, it looks like your X isn't really going out wide enough.
So start and end need to be more drastic?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I see your patch?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Give me a sec. I shared the wrong thing. Share the desktop. There we go.
Let's see, start and end.
That's the X.
Oh yeah, you're scaling the join. Don't do that.
Okay. I guess
Just-
I plugged it in wrong.
Yeah,
What
put
should it-
that back to 1.
Okay.
And if
So
you
what-
want to, like I showed you, because that's scaling the whole thing down, right? If you want to just scale the Y, then, well, you're doing it there, but just get rid of the offset now for that function sign. Yeah, and scale it down by like 1.5 or something like that. Although this looks cool. I mean, whatever.
So,
But 0.15.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, didn't like that.
I hit the
Oh,
speed
that's
and the, yeah.
I'll just put that in the thing next.
And you know,
Got Perlin for the Z.
yeah.
Okay. And then, so you don't scale the join.
Well, that'll scale everything. That'll scale that whole matrix, right? So it'll scale every plane in that matrix.
Okay.
So
Only for the X values? If I plug in here?
No, for all the planes, so X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
So every cell has an X, Y, and Z, and if you scale it, then it's going to scale all of those. So it'll just shrink it down. So if you want to shrink it down, you can do that. You can try, scaling it by half, but it's going to do it for.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. It's pretty big.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now
Okay.
you're making like you need some stars, and you'll have the more you know.
All right. Cool. I think that answered my question. So if you wanted to scale each one individually, that's like a whole other thing, isn't it?
Scale
that-
each line individually.
Yeah, would that be like, could you scale like the jit.mo.lines? Is that an attribute? Let's see. Yeah?
Yeah, why would you want to scale them though? Like this is just the X value. It goes from the left to the right of the screen.
Right.
So are you saying like you want them to be spaced further apart, or?
Well, I guess you would have independent control over each, over X, Y, and Z, wouldn't you?
If you use jit.gen, you do, right? Then you can swizz out X, Y, and Z and do whatever you want.
Okay, but you have to do that after the join. Then.
Yeah, so here let's say that we wanted our Y values to be different, right? Because right now, like all the rows, they kind of look close together,
Right.
So after the grid, we could do a jit.gen.
Okay. Sorry, let me get some of this out of the way.
Yeah, and then double click in there, and let's swizz out X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
And let's make a vec object with 3 zeros.
Echo.
A veco. And X and Z are going to stay the same, so we'll just plug those in. And now let's multiply Y by 2. Right, and we'll see that now they're a little bit more spaced out on the Y. And we can make that a parameter so we can just do whatever we want, right? And just scale it up and down.
Right.
we like.
I guess I'm confused because now I have two gens going on, and this one's like you can scale the.
Yeah, what is that one is doing before it hits the grid? So that's changing the height of the sine wave itself, and then we make a bunch of copies of that. And now what we're doing is like, oh, we'll space out the y a little bit more now that we've made the rows.
So, what I did here, I can just put like scale $1 and change that, right?
Yeah.
But that goes into the gen, not the row. Right. Whoa.
Well, now you've made the sine wave really, really tall. So you want to put that down to like 1.
Okay.
Or less than 1. 0.15. Yeah.
Okay.
And so that determines how high up and down before the grid the sine wave goes.
Okay.
And then for this other grid, what we're trying to do, what I was attempting to do, and maybe it's working, maybe it's not, is just space out that grid.
Yeah.
I think I'd have to look at it a little more to be correct about how I did it.
Okay. Cool. I think I get it. I just got to mess around with it a little bit more.
Yep.
Okay. Dr. Thompson, how do I change the color of the? Is that just like an attribute in the func, or is that like?
What are you trying to change the color of?
The X, Y, and Z of the join, or what's going into the join, I guess. So is that
What's the join going into?
the gen into the grid, into the gen, into the
and
field,
and then what?
into the field, and then to the mesh. Is it the mesh?
So the mesh is what we're seeing, right? And it has a whole matrix for color.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Right now.
That's
Mine stopped listening to me entirely. Like it just doesn't do anything I tell it.
That's pretty. I kind of like this. I like mine right now. So, anyways,
yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
I like these Mo objects. They're pretty nice. I guess. What is join exactly doing? It's like
That's a good question. And so what I think it does is it gives a clock for all of the phases of these things to change with the speed message, because without the join, it will not move.
well,
right?
But aren't phase and frequency tied? Like I'm confused by that.
They are and they aren't. Right, so we can have a sine wave with a frequency of 1 and a phase of pi, and it's different than a sine wave with a frequency of 1 and a phase of 0. And if we're modulating the starting point, if you think about drawing a circle, right, we're modulating the starting point of where we're drawing the circle. So even though we're spinning around the circle at the same rate, frequency, if we change that starting point, it appears to draw a different curve.
Yeah, and like the frequency maybe determines the phase increment, but where we are in the phase is determined by time.
Well, if you on the jit.mo func, I think if you get the attribute for phase, you will be able to see the phase change based on the speed that you have. Yeah, so choose phase, and then if you run the speed, it should change that phase. Yeah. So that's what's happening with the speed, is that it's just adding some number to the phase, and that speed is determined, mathematically to be at some rate. So the phase angle is adjusted.
Yeah, I love these things. I'm glad we have them.
They're amazing. I particularly like the Perlin noise.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. I'll share what I have. I chose the anthropomorphic route. I'll just do the window, I guess. So here it is. It's little tapeworms moving around. I have 2 of them, so I just made 2 rows of the same thing. So they do a little ballet, a little dance. And I could lengthen how much of that we see until it becomes, something different. But I kind of like the anthropomorphic thread, so I'm just gonna shrink my tapeworm. I like that.
Dr. Thompson.
Yeah.
Well, remember the patch I sent you, I think yesterday?
The shader patch?
Shader patch?
Yeah.
Could say like an apple and a worm, could you have like the physics of that no object affect what I was making? Could that work?
I didn't really understand what you said.
We'll talk about it in the lesson.
Okay. All right. Anybody else come up with something cool? Maybe it takes more time than 30 minutes.
I did. Yeah, I can share too.
All right. Go ahead, Andrew.
Okay. Can you see this?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
He's showing off all the points he can put on his fucking PC. He's such a humble bragger.
I can increase it.
Fuck you. God damn it.
2,890 lines.
Wow.
I would drop the Zoom call if I tried to do that on this.
My computer would explode.
Yeah, neat. It looks like the Death Star exploding.
I had a whole bunch of really cool things along the way, and then I changed one parameter, and it would reset something, and it would mess it all up.
Well, that's the process, right? I think that's the process. And then you have to figure out, you have to gain control of what you're doing so that you can get back to those states. But I usually put a preset object directly into my patch and just say, I'm just going to save along the way. Wow, it does look really neat. Little ribbon aspect.
I made everything like I have like a float that I can change for each parameter, and so it kind of can evolve over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really cool.
I have something.
Yeah, go ahead. I think you can just jump in and share.
Yeah, I don't know.
What I start thinking now is, since we're talking about audio visual, and, we've been kind of sticking with the visual, I start to begin to think, oh, that's neat. I start to begin to think, what's an appropriate sonic consequence for these things or these transformations? Oh, that looks really neat. It's very symmetrical.
Mm-hmm. It's just messing around with the dimensions. I had it stop rendering, and I just messed with the dimensions back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's it. I had something cooler, but it deleted everything, and I was like, well.
What happens if you change the rows?
What rows? Oh, rows here.
Oh, it's a spider. Nice.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And now it's gone. Oh, here it is. Yes.
I would like to share.
All right, go for it.
Let's see. Yeah. There we go.
I love the dabbing. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Well, that's got that very 80s aesthetic there.
Oh. There it is.
Make sure you verify Outlook.
Yeah. And then I made this like auto rotate, but it's probably really dumb.
How did you make it?
Yeah, it's not doing anything. Those were counters.
So to do an auto rotate, probably an easy way to do that is to use jit.anim.drive, like animate.
Jit.anim.drive.
Yeah.
Oh man, my CPU is going right now.
And
fan is just a going.
And then put a message to that is turn.
Oh, put a message to it. Turn.
Let's send all our projects to Andrew's computer.
So 0 point and just do 0 point and then 1 point. We'll just turn it on the y-axis for now.
0 point and then 1 point.
And then 0 point. So 0 on the z-axis.
Okay.
And you hook that into the drive, and the drive will be hooked into the thing you're trying to rotate.
Okay. Into the drive. Wait.
So the drive goes into the mesh.
I see. Oh, that would probably help. Nice. Cool.
How do you get the different colors per thing?
I did auto colors. It's just an attribute. I could do like a geo color, but I was just like, auto colors.
Why don't you just take the output of the field and put that into the color matrix? So turn off auto colors.
Sorry, okay, give me a sec.
Nope. Yep. And then go out of the field object and use that as the color matrix as well as the position matrix.
Wait, so I'm sorry, I'm confused.
So if you
So
look at
this-
the inlets to the mesh,
I figured it out. That's cool.
there's
Oh.
the color array. Yeah, and just use that as the color array as well.
Oh,
So
okay,
in addition
so,
to the position array. Yeah,
yeah,
there you go.
I guess it does the same thing.
Very similar, right? So yeah, auto colors would basically take the position array and turn it into this,
I gotcha.
which may make more sense. Well, there's different ways to do that.
Huh. Cool.
All right. Anybody else got something?
I have something, but I can't like show my camera because I'm using my camera for the motion thing.
Oh yeah.
So
We'll just show your screen, right?
Yeah, let me do that. Can I? I'm using entire screen. There we go. Okay. Allow. Can you?
Well,
Yeah,
that's
that's
really
you.
weird. Okay.
That's you. Sorry.
That's really weird.
So,
Oh yeah.
so I'm doing some sort of chroma key thing here, and I'm trying to still get the hang of it. I don't think I scaled this quickly. I scaled it very quickly, so I don't think I did it right. But
Yeah.
I've got my position of this tape, gaff tape that I've wrapped around my finger, controlling the field.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and then this is just using the CV package. So the jit.cv, and so I'm doing some.
It looks like it's going diagonally from left to right, which would indicate that
is.
your x and y values are the same. So you'd probably want.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I just needed to get any value.
Oh, okay, yeah.
At this point, right? And
But I like the idea of being able
It's
to-
not exactly one-to-one. It's
like
not
you're-
exactly one-to-one, but it's some kind of data.
Yeah, so
Right?
you want to be the field. That would be cool. Move it
Yeah.
around. That's
So
pretty
I
neat.
wanted to. I was trying to get this to work a little bit more. I noticed that I really want to get this jit.mo where is this output as a a texture. I feel like that's really cool, and I feel like it's super because you've got this nice.
I think that's built into some of the objects actually, is that it can be
Really?
a texture. I think there's a jit.mo.texture, something weird like that. But it's easy enough to make that a texture. Just run it into a jit.gl.texture object,
Yeah,
and then it's a texture.
but I was thinking oh, I should. Yeah, see, I didn't even think about that because that'd be the easy option. I'm like, okay, I have to send it. I have to send it to the world and have it output as a texture. Blah, 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 blah. No, it's not that hard.
It's actually a
but
pretty
anyway,
powerful feature that a matrix is generic.
and
So
I've
it looks like a color, it looks like a shape. And I play with that a lot actually, to go from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions.
yeah. And then I found this little wanderer guy, which
Yeah.
is actually location data, right?
Yes.
But I've just
But
used
you're using it
the
as a
radius.
radius.
Yes.
Okay.
So all sorts of odd things being not used for their proper, what is it? Proper uses, but I don't know.
It's probably proper.
I fixed mine.
Making
Okay.
things work. Yeah.
Let's
okay,
see it. I
let
want
me-
to see it.
Fix the line with. Yeah, so I wanted to make a bird.
Yeah.
Wanted it to look kind of like a bird, and this looks nothing like a bird, but it's on the way to looking like a bird.
Who are you to say whether it looks like a bird or not?
You are so representational.
Oh yeah, it looks like a bird.
What else I got?
Oh, it's neat. I like that.
It deleted itself, so I had to do that again and remember how it was in the thing. So I tried to take a picture of the screen before I knew it was going to crash.
Yep.
Crashed right before.
Yeah, and
Push, push,
remember that I like the wobbliness and the jitteriness of it, but you can smooth out those motions with a jit.xfade as we've done in the past. So just jit.xfade to a matrix that feeds back to the right side, and then you'll be able to smooth out how jittery that motion is. It's a common trick.
I wanted to try also putting the thing in there where it's where you were saying that they would all just work with each other, and I was kind of at first I thought that you had to have like a certain data type or whatever. That
No.
was kind of experiment with like using. I really like this mix thing in Gen because it's just the X fade basically, but a lot more. I don't know. Something seems more flexible about it. I'm not quite sure what.
Yeah. Very good. All right. Anybody else before we abandon ship here?
I'd like to share mine if that's okay.
That'd be fantastic.
No.
There's no way I'm putting up this whole video of us sitting silently for 30 minutes. I'm just thinking about that. Oh, look at that. It's a party.
Yes, it's an 80s psychedelic party.
I'm positive I went to one of those.
So I ended up using different join, one for the colors that uses the same functions just on different planes.
Yeah.
And then the one that draws.
So your second join, you said, is just colors.
Yes.
And you're using the lines the line function and the sign function to set the colors, I guess?
Yes, in some way that I don't understand very well.
Can we look at the a P window of the output of the jit.mo.perlin?
Yes. This one?
Yep. Okay. Yeah, there's different things you can change about that. Right now it's static, right? So it's not moving. You can change the speed of that, but you can also change several other parameters of that. And it's a nice way to examine it with those P windows. So you kind of get an idea of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just one-dimensional, so it's just changing things in some pattern, but a noisy pattern. That looks really neat.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have something to share.
All right, Joshua, let's see it.
Here it is.
Oh, yeah, beautiful.
Oh, wow.
Look at that.
Awesome.
Whoa, nice, dude.
What does that remind me of?
The Psychedelic Nights.
It reminds me of a Phil Morton piece called Colorado something. Anyway, it was made with the Dan Sendin's image processor in Chicago. Very nice. I love those colors.
Just good old auto colors.
Yeah, look at that blending. Great. Well, good work, you guys. I'm glad we got to introduce ourselves to the Mo objects, which I think what's interesting about it maybe is that we have done something similar in Gen, and we just see how sometimes abstracting ideas so that they're easier to work with is fruitful. You know, we don't have to program everything from scratch, but at the same time, you know, we may want to add to the functionality of these jit.mo objects by being able to do whatever we want, which is what the power of Gen is about. But at some point, I found these to be quite powerful for this John Whitney-esque sort of exploration of motion graphics, and I hope that you'll find something similar in them as well. I think it's a good way to achieve natural motion, so especially with the Perlin noise is a good algorithm.
Dr. Thompson?
Yeah.
So if you wanted to use like an audio source to control that, would it, especially like Perlin, would it be like, would you have to like smooth it out? Would it be like too jumpy if you had?
Almost inevitably it'll be, yeah, and that's an interesting question about how to smooth out audio data. And it's also an interesting question to think about what is audio data. Because if we're just looking at you know, amplitudes, which is what we see when we look at waveforms, then those tend to jump very fast, right? So we tend to take averages of those. Or you may choose to, you know, low pass filter your audio coming in so that it doesn't have such high jumps in the amplitudes, which is an interesting way to think about it, is that you're actually filtering data when you filter audio. Or you may choose to use the ZL descriptors, which you get through the package manager, and see what you can find there in order to get some information out of the audio that's maybe more relevant than simply just amplitude changes. So for instance, you know, what sort of frequency or what sort of brightness or what are
Can
we dealing with?
You can do that with the ZSA descriptors, right?
That's what I meant. ZSA descriptors. I misspoke.
Oh, okay, like the freak peak stuff.
That's right. Yeah.
And the Perlin noise seems really interesting. So like it seems like it's like compared to like the jit.noise, which seems to be like a 4-car type matrix. This seems to be more of like a one-plane matrix. I don't know.
That's right. So it's a one-dimensional Perlin noise. So there's 1D, 2D, and 3D Perlin noise, and I guess
cool.
multiple dimensions. And in a 2D Perlin noise, if you think of it as arrows pointing in different directions, right?
Mm-hmm.
With Perlin noise, what'll happen is that the arrows will point randomly, but they'll kind of flow. So it won't just point in any old direction, right? It's based on what's around it, but still random. So if you're making a flow field, right, things kind of flow through it in a random way, but without just jumping all over the place. It looks kind of natural. So the algorithm for Perlin noise is a little complicated, so it's always better to just try to find one that's already written, because it's been done.
That's cool.
All right, everybody. I think I'll edit down this video and just post the beginning of the Mo stuff in case anybody needs it. But I think you guys have a handle on it. But I'll do that anyway. And I will see you soon. Bye.
Bye.